How's it going, everyone? My name is Nick Clement from Access4 and welcome to MSPland. If you run a sales team or are a seller yourself, you're going to love this episode. I sit down with Mat Jameson, the new head of channel at Access4, to talk about his long and storied career in selling voice and telecommunications. There's a whole lot of gold in this episode for those who want to learn about selling voice and building a voice practice. And if you run a sales team, you especially don't want to miss the part where Matt talks about how to structure commission for a sales team that's selling voice. Let's jump into it. Matt, welcome to the show. How are you going today?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me on board.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm very excited about today's show. I know you've got years and years of experience working in voice, more so than probably a lot of people in the industry. And I'm very excited to find out more about that and some of the key insights and learnings we might be able to pull out of it. But to begin with, for those people who don't know who you are, can you please introduce yourself?
Yep. Thank you, Nick. So, Mat Jameson, I'm the head of channel here at Access4. But as Nick has alluded to, I've had a long history and career in the voice world. So a little over 20 years in voice, mainly selling telephone systems and working directly in the phone system solutions business. So I remember back in my earliest days, I didn't say I want to grow up and be in the telco industry, but exactly right. Who does? But after a colourful career in a few different industries, I found myself in telco as a new recruit salesperson. Didn't know the industry, didn't know what to do, but what I did know is how to sell and build a pipeline and prospect, and so that's what I went out and did. I prospected hard, and I walked the streets, and I knocked on doors, and I started to build a database and promote phone systems.
Yep.
And I think back then it was analog-based phone systems, analog-based telephone lines, and pitch was get off the analog and get onto digital.
Yep.
And to be honest, in 20 years, the game really hasn't changed. We're still trying to come up with a new solution to help a customer get on board with the latest technology. And I've, over my time, seen multiple versions of that happen. So as I said, first one was analog and converting analog telephone lines into digital and talking to customers about ISDN and how they should migrate from analog to ISDN and some of the challenges associated back then to have timed local calls. And that would be one of the challenges you'd have to overcome.
Yep.
To then moving to the next stage, which was it's time for digital. Okay, all our customers have got digital. Now we've got to move to IP.
So it's quite a transition, right?
Yeah.
And everything's still changing now moving forward. You just started with the analog, now moving up the chain. So is the way that you sold telephony and these sort of telco services changed at all? You talked about walking the streets, knocking doors. I don't know how many people would find that as a successful strategy these days, but back then, did it work?
So back then it really did work. And I would agree that times have changed a little bit and the way in which, but I think the principle is the same.
Yep.
And that is that if you're in a position where you're a startup trying to find a customer, then you've got to do the hard yards. And whether those hard yards back then were walking the streets, knocking on doors and saying, "Hi, I'm Matt. What sort of phone system have you got?" And going from there to a LinkedIn campaign or an EDM cycle or
Whatever else it might be.
Yeah, whatever it is to reach a mass amount of people to try and find someone that's in your market that's coming up to their buying window.
Yep.
So that's the hard yards. And I don't think that's changed. Just the medium or the way in which you go about finding those has changed.
Yep.
But I think beyond that, the way I sell or the way I've always sold is solution-based selling.
Yep.
Finding out what the customer's problem is, how my product set solves it.
Yep. Whether you're dropping boxes or selling VoIP or cloud voice solutions, it's all the same, right?
It is. absolutely. And that is that how can I best solve a problem?
Yep.
And the more you do it, the more you understand your customer's business, business vertical that they happen to be in.
Yep.
You get more familiar with the problems they're trying to solve, the better you get at solving the problems.
Yep, yep. So tell me about some of the verticals. I mean, one of the things that I know I speak with MSPs about a lot and CSPs about it, just the verticals that they specialize in. And I think in many times as a business is growing and scaling up, they don't specifically say, oh, I'm just going to go after this vertical and go for it. It's because they start with some customers, they learn more about those customers start trusting them, those customers start talking to other similar businesses and similar industries, and then you start generating word of mouth through that. Is that how you also built a lot of your vertical experience in business in your previous life?
Yeah, look, absolutely it is. And I think it's a combination of chicken and egg
Yep.
chicken scenario. When you find a problem you can solve with a solution that you offer, you often find the same problem in the same vertical.
Yep.
And then you can build from it. So I've had a lot of success in verticals in building that by saying, okay, I've solved this problem. Surely there's someone else in this industry that's got this same problem. And so then you go and say, well, how about I solve that for you? The other thing is you can build off the customer. So you do a really good job with that particular problem solve.
Yep.
And you say, hey, who do you know in your industry that would benefit from me solving that problem for them too?
And the more your customers trust you, the more the easier it is to go to those customers and say, hey, like, you love me, I love you. We've been working together for a long time. Is there anyone in your industry you can recommend me to? And in most cases, if you have a good relationship, they're going to say yes, and they're going to give you that warm introduction. And that's such a great way to grow business.
Absolutely. And I've run many a successful who do you know campaign, and that is getting your front-facing, customer-facing people, and whether it's on a service desk or an engineer or a salesperson, hey, you like us, you trust us, who do you know that we could do that for too? And that's the best walk-in recommendation you can get started.
No, that's good. That's good. So tell me about the kind of sales teams that you've worked with, because it sounded like that you started your career, you were doing it yourself, you were on the street, you were knocking doors. Then as you progressed in your career and the business that you worked with grew, you would have started running sales teams. How do you like, what's best practice for running a sales team in the voice industry?
So, I mean, best practice is, so you're right, definitely did grow up into being a sales manager. And I think there's a couple of factors. One is salespeople have a degree of creativity. They like to be in charge of their own destiny. The more you can allow them to work within the business's parameters, but is still within their own creativity, which is get sale done the way you best feel to do it, I've found is the better way you get the better results.
Yep.
A lot of salespeople are anti-establishment, anti-authority, don't like to be told what to do.
Yep.
You know, if you tell them to front up at the office at 8:30 every morning and not leave till 5 o'clock, then they don't like that.
Yep.
And you know, my most successful sales teams have always worked on the mantra, I don't care where you are as long as the number's on the board.
Yep. It's about the outcomes, not what they're putting in, right?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's the best thing. And look, the biggest piece of advice I can give to any business is don't steal from your salespeople. There's a real tendency that you get a customer base, you start to build a sales team, they start to build success, you have a commission structure that starts to work, they start to build on that and they start to earn commissionable dollars, and then they start to earn really good money. And then the business looks at it and goes, well, hang on a second, why am I paying that person so much money? That's not great. I don't want to, if I could take half of that back, then that'd be more on the bottom line.
Yep.
And so there's this real, and I've seen it time and time again, where a business will go, nah, change the commission structure, they're earning too much.
Yep. And then the salesperson disappears.
Gone.
And then all your customers go, all that revenue dries up, and you're not getting any money back, and you're not paying any more commission, but you're not getting any additional income.
That's it. And I think the thing is that sales is hard, right? And there is an art for it, and good salespeople are hard to find, and you do need to pay them well, and you need to reward them and remunerate them well. But I also don't subscribe to the fact that you can't keep good salespeople.
Yep.
I had sales teams that were with me for 5, 6, 7, and 8 years. And you do that by giving them what they need, paying them well, allowing them the freedom to be the person they want to be, obviously within the parameters of the business.
Yeah.
And you can get some really huge success
cool.
out of running a team like that.
Cool. So talking about sales commission, how did you structure commission back when you were dropping boxes and there was large CapEx sales versus when you would have been transitioning more into VoIP and cloud voice solutions, which would have been recurring revenue of OpEx base? Was that a rough transition that you sort of had to really be carefully planning for, both for the business, but also for how you had to transition the sales team as well in terms of how they got commissioned, right?
Yep. So really good question, and I'd love to be able to answer that. I planned it exceptionally well.
Yep. we can say whatever we want in this, right?
So the reality is that how we used to pay was we used to be box droppers, which was all about margin. So commission structures were all about a percentage of the margin.
Yep.
And the basic principle was pretty easy. You bring $1 in for the business, then you get a percentage of it.
Yep.
Right? Every buck you bring in, you get a percentage. Doesn't matter what the product is, doesn't matter how you're adding it on, you get a percentage of the margin available in any deal.
Yep.
And in that box dropping world, it was a run from sale to sale to sale to sale, because what you'd be doing is you'd bank the revenue from the phone system deal. You'd then, in a month's time, have the bill for the supplier, pay your wages, pay your bits and pieces, all that sort of stuff. But ultimately, as all business people do, is you spend the money before you've actually... and so then you'd be chasing the next deal and the next deal and the next deal. So, come around the blinding light that says, hang on a second, if I could get some recurring revenue, that would change the way I have to do business.
Yep.
That then lines up with the transition to IP, the transition to cloud, the transition to, pay per user per month, recurring revenue type models. But that results in us having to have a change in the commission structure.
Because it changes cash flow, right?
It does. It does. And so it's a really difficult transition if you're in that CapEx sugar hit type business to transition, because you've got to be able to sustain the business over a long period of time until the recurring revenue gets to that point where it's taking care of most of your fixed costs. So I don't think there's an exact plan on how you do it, but I think it's a staged and a transitional plan. The way in which I went about it was we put more emphasis on services to start with, and then we started to look at ways in which we could finance some of our investments. But basically, it's just getting that mix right. So it's taking on a product that you can use as an MRR and saying, well, I need about 10 or 20% of that and I can survive. And then in 6 months' time, I can make it 30%. And in 6 months' time, I can make it 60% and just transition over. From a commission perspective, it's a difficult calculation. Margin's a pretty easy way to do it. But what you got to do is look at the total contract value, total customer value, and then bring that back. Most of the exercises I ran was you just give a percentage of the first 12 months of the recurring revenue. Okay. So it wasn't, was that typically looking at, say, you picked up a business, they got 20 seats, it's an accounting office, ARPU is $20, contract is for 36 months. You wouldn't look at the whole life of that contract. You would look at the first 12 months
look at what the income is, the margin is, and they would take commission just from that first 12 months.
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And that's
Yep.
and that's paid up front to the sales rep before you even earn that income.
That's
essentially.
right. Yes. So again, it's another part of the complication of moving from
Yep.
that CapEx model to MRR is that you're also funding future revenue, or you're funding commissions from future revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Um,
Okay.
But I don't see there's any way around it. As much as even the best of salespeople with the best intent, they're point operated. They want,
Mm-hmm.
I made my sale, I want my money.
Yep. Yep.
And to keep them motivated, that's what you got to do.
Yeah, cool. Did you ever run into situations where sales reps during that transition, they were just like, I'm not going to sell any of this recurring revenue stuff. I'm just going to drop boxes because that's where I get the biggest bang for my buck, essentially, from a commission perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to manage that really carefully. But ultimately, and you have to manage it carefully, going back to my earlier comment,
Yep.
that you can't steal from your salespeople.
Yes.
So what you got to do is you got to turn the commission down on that side
Mm.
and turn it up on this side,
Sure.
so that you naturally attract them to the fact that, well, hang on a second, same amount of effort, different style of sale,
Yep.
but the result's better for me here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to transition.
And they would be, say that the first 12 months period of a recurring revenue deal passed, the next 12 months happens again, they would get commission again for that second year. So essentially, if they've locked in that recurring revenue base.
No, so what you would really tend to do is you would say, okay, we're going to sell a deal that has a 36-month term on it.
Yep.
The rep would get 12 months of that revenue
Upfront.
recognizable at
Yep.
a percentage of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's their deal done.
Okay.
Right.
Gotcha.
Go and find another one.
Yeah. Okay. So
Right.
it's about what they're bringing in the door, not they wouldn't necessarily recommend a trail commission on top of something like that.
So I'm a big fan of the concept of trailing commissions,
Mhm.
but to be honest, it's not something I have been able to successfully bring in.
Sure.
Because at what point, if you've got a longevity, then you can get a very fat and happy salesperson.
Yep.
Who's not, motivated to go and find that new deal or that new customer.
And I mean, after they've brought in, if depending on the type of sales business or operations that you're running, they're not necessarily have anything to do with that business after they've brought them in as well, right? If they're
That's
just
right.
bringing it in.
Yeah. And given that there's a whole, the salesperson is to bring the customer on board, there's a whole team of people that have to deliver the solution,
Yep.
maintain the solution, and
Run
keep
the
it going,
support,
and-
everything
and,
else. Yeah.
and keep the doors open. And so that revenue is for them.
Yes. Yep. That makes sense. Yeah.
What I did do is that once we got this cycle moving successfully and you've got longevity in your sales team, what you would start to do is reward them to keep that customer on board.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're selling a contracted term,
Yep.
so you might at the end of 3 years say to a salesperson, hey, look, there's a 50% multiplier on a recontract.
Yep. Okay.
So we still want you focused on new contracts
Mm-hmm.
where you get 100%.
Yep.
But there's a 50% on an existing. So you could
Gotcha.
go back
Okay.
to a customer that you sold a solution to 3 years ago
Yep.
and say, hey, is it all working out? Yeah, it's great. Well, how about we re-sign?
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, I guess everything evolves with the type of product that you're selling and the type of business that you want to run, right? So,
Yeah.
as everything moves to a bit more of that cloud-based subscription licensing per user per month, you need to change the way that you're generating cash flow and then compensating people from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, there's subtle changes to the selling story and getting customers used to the fact that telephony is now a commodity consumer
Yep.
recurring revenue type model. And there's still plenty of verticals out there that they haven't adapted that to. But we're lucky, really, because it's the Microsofts and the cloud suppliers of the world that have changed that
Yes. Yep.
environment, and it's far more acceptable to be a SaaS type
Yep.
business.
Yep.
So why not have telco as a SaaS service?
And then before, right, it was back when you would have first gotten into it, the people who were selling voice would have just been the communication service providers, right? But now it's MSPs are picking up voice as a big part of what they're taking to market as well, because as you said, that transition through vendors such as Microsoft, the transition to cloud voice services. Now they can sell voice, maybe even in a better, more efficient way than what the traditional box droppers might have been able to sell it as, right?
Yeah, look, absolutely right. So, I mean, for years, there's been a, the war between the managed service provider and the communication service provider about, who is in what space. And the CSPs have always been headed towards more of the IT MSP space. The MSPs have always been headed towards more of the voice space.
So it's a convergence.
It's always been, and there's been a long competition about who should have that space. I think the reality is that for organisations that don't have internal IT systems, and you'll find that in the smaller space, they don't have IT resources, so they contract them out. MSPs naturally fall out of that place. And then you've got larger customers who might have an internal IT manager, but that person is a person that manages the services, doesn't actually do the work, and would manage multiple MSP or vendors or contractors from that perspective. And the reality is that mix is probably far more dominant in the marketplace than it ever was before. And so the MSP naturally becomes the trusted advisor. And so being a trusted advisor, it puts you in a really good position to then sell any of the product sets, in particular voice. I can't help but support the CSPs in the world, because that's where I've come from. That there is still there is good market, and that's where companies have their own internal IT resources. But most people wouldn't bother to tackle voice internally. So there's still a pretty strong market for to have a reason to be.
So when you were back working in CSP land, podcast is called MSP land, but hey, like we love everyone.
We love everyone.
If you're a service provider, whatever you are. Were you introducing services that maybe were typically services that an MSP would introduce? Is that the transition that you're really seeing? CSPs are evolving into MSPs. I know there's also been CSPs who have been acquiring MSPs just to get that managed service suite in. But you also see the same transition with those who are in managed print as well, who are transitioning over to become, more general MSPs with a wider service suite.
Yeah. So voice is a really cool product, in that lots of people, almost every business in the country has to have some sort of voice solution, right? So your addressable market is huge. And for a lot of businesses, voice is still important, and it's also in real time. So, and there are not many communication mediums that are still real time. So that's why voice is really important. I think that the mix, though, is that from a sales perspective, is voice, all lights and shining and interesting to sell? No, not really, right? And in a customer's world, the security is keeping them up at night. The
backups,
So there's all of those things that become such a high profile thought process or product to sell. So voice becomes this really nice add-on, because it's a sticky product. If you get it in early, do well, then it's set and forget type scenario. So it's a really good, valuable product to have in your product mix, but it's hard to lead with.
Yes.
Right. So what most providers do, if you're MSP, then you start to talk about those security sort of products. A lot of your CSPs traditionally went into the data space. So, internet services, SD-WAN products, MPLS and network services, SIP trunks, etc., into that CSP world. And then again, you've seen a collision of that. So as older data network infrastructure, MPLS style networks transformed into SD-WAN, SD-WAN has a security device at the end. Suddenly you're in the security world. Suddenly you're in the MSP space. Right? Okay. So again, a lot of these paths lead to this collision around it, but it's really a matter of finding your groove. and what it is you can, and having a few different leading items
Yep.
that you might get in. And in the Access4 world, it might be we're leading with a particular voice product. It might be that we're leading with our SMS gateway.
Mm-hmm.
It might be that we're leading with an analytics
Yep.
piece. It might be that we're leading with a CRM integration piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's having those multiple products that you can lead with
Mm-hmm.
and capture the whole of spend as you can.
Yep. Again, because stickier customers is what everyone wants, right? And the more services that you can offer with them, the more sticky they become, the harder it is for them to leave, and the more added value you provide. So, that's why so many MSPs, they don't necessarily lead with voice or UCaaS, but they have a lot of success with it because they have a big, strong customer base that's super sticky. Retention is low. By offering more services such as voice, means that retention rate's only going to be increasing.
That's it. And, if we go back to the real start of our conversation, I talk about the fact that, I'm busy out there when I started my career door knocking to build a database of customers that I could work with. I made a very successful career off that initial base that I built.
Yep.
And I sold multiple solutions to the same customers over and over and over again, transitioning them from analog to digital, digital to IP, IP to cloud.
Yep. And they would have been way easier sell than with a net new logo, right?
That's it.
Yeah.
So again, that's, comes back to that importance of listening to your customer, reaching out to your customer, making an excuse or a reason to be part of your customer's world and making them happy means you're there. And again, you don't want to leave anything on the table. When you leave something on the table, you leave an opportunity for a competitor to come in and offer something different.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I think that's also the same message that we give MSPs all the time. If you're not offering voice or UCaaS, your customers are going to be going to someone else, and they're probably going to be going to someone else who also provides competitive service to you, not just voice.
That's it.
And then all of a sudden they're speaking with someone who provides all of the same managed services you provide, all the same security and backup services you provide. So by not providing that voice service, a service that every business needs, like we talk about how big the market is, it's pretty much every single business.
That's right. Exactly.
I don't think I know of any business who doesn't have some sort of phone.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just a no-brainer in many cases.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the massive eye-opening things for me when I first started in the industry, was the thought that every business out there has a need for one of my products.
Yep.
How hard can this be?
It's funny to think of, like, what other products or services can you say that every single business probably needs?
Yeah, exactly.
Like phone services. I mean, electricity. Well,
yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. So, look, that's all great. So, tell me how then we found each other in this room right now, speaking with each other. What was your journey to Access4? How did you find us, and what were you excited about when you first walked into the store? Because you're here for less than 6 months still.
Yep.
But there's a lot of excitement around what you're doing with the channel team and where we're heading. So, tell me a bit about how you found us. What are you sort of looking at in the near future, and what's your vision for the channel team?
So, I found myself at Access4 because an assessment of where I wanted to be and what I felt the marketplace was looking at. I think Access4 ticked all of those boxes, and it's a combination of a long career in voice and being able to bring that expertise to a business that specializes in voice, but also works on being able to make voice easy for partners who may not have the level of experience I do. And so the biggest attraction to me was the ability to impart my years of experience and knowledge to a crowd of many to benefit from. So that for me was a really big attractor to Access4, and then taking the Access4 model in that it's monthly recurring revenue. I experienced the pain of moving from a CapEx cash flow difficulty type business to that monthly recurring revenue, and just how powerful it is, and how much you sleep better at night with monthly recurring revenue. And so that attracted me. And then ultimately that really solid technical product, customer focused business, and being 100% channel, meaning that we can focus solely on our partners, and that if the partners win, we win.
Yep.
And that really deeply subscribes to what I'm passionate about, which is everybody wins,
Yep.
right? If you can get a win-win-win scenario, then it's a good day.
Yes, yes. We win, our partners win, the end user wins, everyone's happy.
That's it. And so, so that's what brought me on board. As far as my vision for the channel, it's continue to work really closely with all of our partners. We've got partners in different stages of their businesses and different parts of their journey. I think it's recognizing what stage of the journey they're on and how we can best help them. But again, being reassured that it doesn't matter what stage of business that they're on, we can help.
Yep.
And we can be part of that journey, which I think is also really exciting to be part of that. And I think we're also in a really unique position. There are none that I can really think of that does have the true unique selling proposition that Access4 offers. Being able to sell voice in such a way that we're doing it better and offering it in a different way than anybody else in the marketplace. Yep. It's a pretty impressive place to be. And I think as we move forward into the marketplace and as competitors consolidate and fade away and come and go, we've got a really solid mix, 100% channel, win-win scenario. Couldn't ask for anything better.
Perfect. You always get so excited about the fact that we have a porting team. And you said coming from that sort of traditional CSP space, the most difficult thing was always porting, but we have a team that does it for our partners. So I know you've just spoken so many times about just how amazing that is. And I don't think anyone really understands it as much as yourself. So tell everyone.
Porting. So porting is one of the most painful problems that you've got to overcome. And there's so much sales ability around it. There's so much setting customer expectations. And as a salesperson, there's nothing worse than that. You've just sold this big solution and the customer's high-fiving and everyone's high-fiving and we're all happy, but you've got to port that customer. Yep. And right, I need to find a place in the world where there's no mobile coverage on the day they're going to port so that they just can't contact me. Porting is a really complex process, particularly in the Australian marketplace. I think it's far more complex than it needs to be, but it's from traditional infrastructure-based, geographical-based telephony numbers, and that transition that I've experienced firsthand, analog to digital, digital to IP. You didn't use, if you were moving from Richmond to South Melbourne 10 years ago, you couldn't take your telephone numbers with you.
Okay? Painful.
And because of that architecture, porting has become this major thing. So to arrive here at Access4 and go, hey, we've got a porting team and we've got a fast porting process and we're connected to multiple carriers and we can do on-net ports and we can pick where we want to route minutes and we can overstamp numbers and we can bring in a mix. It's like, wow, somebody's actually thought of all of the pain points and let's fix it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah. It's as you said, it's, I mean, I don't have any firsthand experience myself. I'm in marketing, so I might be living up in a cloud when it comes to porting, but I'll take your word from it that it's an excruciating process. And I know our porting team is absolutely amazing, led by Emily. So it's
an absolute shout out to the whole porting team.
Yeah, for sure.
They do a wonderful job. And I think for anybody that has experienced porting outside of the Access4 world to come into this world and see it, it's hats off. This thing is brilliant.
And I think as you said, right, like people who have only experienced Access4 porting, it still takes time. Sometimes there's still hurdles to overcome and people still get a bit frustrated. But if you ever did porting before working with Access4, I don't think anyone would be complaining. You'd be like, oh, okay, great, that's fine, whatever, that's not a problem. So That's amazing. Cool. Well, this was a great chat. I really enjoyed that. I hope everyone listening learned some new things, learned a bit more about Matt. But I had a great time. So thanks a lot coming onto the show. And we're gonna have to get you back on here again later on, because I'm sure there's more stuff up in that brain of yours that we've got to pull out. There's so much experience for us to draw on. So thanks a lot for coming onto the show.
No problem. Thanks, Nick. It was great.
All good. Thanks, mate.